the sweet spot, the Goldilocks, if you will,
Yeah.
of type of unit is a 2-2. Not too big, not too small. I assume that the porridge is just right.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hey everybody, welcome in to another edition of the Get Invested podcast. We are happy you're here with us to talk all things real estate investing and real estate investing. As always, I am one of your hosts, Jordan Stone.
I'm Matthias Wilson.
We're excited as always to get into it. Perhaps maybe some shenanigans, but maybe we'll just, maybe we'll just stay right on it this time. Matthias, what do you think? Just right on task. It's never happened before, but hey, there's always a first time for everything.
We could try.
Yeah.
We could try it.
Listen, I only have one thing before we get started, so maybe that'll get us off on the right track, which is I just want to say to the listener out there they need to know how dedicated I am to this podcast, that I'm currently podcasting while not having any running water. So
it's well known that the podcasting requires running water.
Well, you gotta wet the whistle. I mean, good thing I have lots of different Brita pitchers
Water
of various sorts. I don't have any cisterns in the back, but I've got lots of different Britas for both drinking and for my plants, so I'm okay. But I will say it was interesting to give myself the old cowpoke bath this morning. Just stand at the sink, and I got a pitcher of water, like old school, like in the basin. You know how they used to have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it's a Brita pitcher. It's not exactly like that kind of. Yeah. Anyway,
So it's purified.
so yeah, that's me. I'm they're doing some repairs in the neighborhood. There's a lot of issues in this community with our plumbing. It's an unfortunate situation. I now am in the know on all of that, of course, because
as a HOA member.
yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it's not like I'm signing off on anything. There's no real choice. It's like, this is happening, and you're like, yep, we have money, please fix. The good news is we have a pretty good situation in that the company that does all this for us, and the reason they do it all for us, is the owner actually used to live here. And he still owns the house and rents it to one of his employees. So
he has a reason to care about the
he has
quality
vested
and the
interest, yes,
speed of the
in the situation.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, if he charges us a ton of money, we're going to be like, okay, well, your HOA assessment is going up. So
yeah.
and so he's got history here and he's got employees. So, I mean, it works out pretty well. Great name, by the way, as well. His last name is Beaver, and they're called Busy Beavers Plumbing. That's rock solid. That is rock solid.
There you go.
That's all I got. My dedication, weird baths, and excellent plumbers. Okay. What about you?
Get ready for traveling to mom's house for Thanksgiving and for the Chiefs game. So as we record this, so that's trying to tie up all the loose ends. Obviously, some end of the year stuff, taxes, accounting, all those things. But just trying to keep afloat and enjoy Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays.
Yeah, as you guys hear this, we'll have definitely already done all of that. Well, the Thanksgiving stuff. Are you guys driving back up for Christmas or just Thanksgiving?
No, just Thanksgiving. We'll be home for Christmas is the plan as of now.
Doing stuff with Jen's parents? Are they coming over from
No,
Jersey?
be home, like at our house.
Why are they coming over?
Unsure. They're welcome to.
I mean, maybe they might be on a Christmas cruise. We don't know.
That's a real threat with them.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to talk about something today that is the opposite of a threat. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. And that is, well, actually, it is an opportunity, but it's one that we find and recognize. It's not one that falls in our lap per se, but we're going to talk about what we've termed the perfect property. That's more of a matter of criterion situation than, it's actually perfection. But we're just going to talk about all the things we look for in finding a deal to purchase to bring to our investors. So with that intro, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting because our value add strategy, finding a property that's perfect would absolutely not work with our strategy. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. But let's call it the perfect deal. There we go. Not the perfect property, the perfect deal. So we'll call it the perfect deal. I think part of what makes it the perfect deal is the fact that No, and you'll see the common theme here as we kind of list off some of the things we look for. The common theme is nobody else knows about it, or nobody knows about it yet. Nobody's looking for it yet. So, one of the advantages, we'll start off here. One of the advantages of being an experienced real estate investor is knowing value when you see it and recognizing value before the market does. So you don't want to see a whole bunch of investors rushing into a Huntsville, Alabama, like, ooh, it's a huge growth, high income area. Everybody wants an apartment there. Well, everybody figured it out, generally at the same time. So the people who got there early did well. Everybody else overpaid, and then it was overbuilt because developers saw the same
Yeah,
opportunity.
NASA's been there for a while.
Yeah, there's the Arsenal. They got all the stuff. I just use that example of Austin, Texas, very similar. It's like rents are falling in Austin, Texas right now because everybody said, "Hey, Austin, Texas is a great place to go invest in apartments." It's like, well, eventually the getting is not as good as it was. So part of what makes the deal perfect is the fact that you get there before other people recognize the same value. So that like I said, as we list off kind of these items, the less competition but same value is kind of what we're going for in these in a perfect deal. So we'll start off market. If as soon as a commercial property, especially multifamily apartments, what happens when a broker gets a deal or when they talk to an owner who's thinking about selling? Is what they'll do is they'll go, hey, give us some details on it. The broker to the owner of the property, give us some details, and we'll give you kind of an opinion of what we think the value is. As they're doing that, they'll also reach out to, they know the property, they know generally what the property is. They'll reach out to a couple of their investor contacts, their Matthiases, and go, hey, this guy may or may not be thinking about selling. Here's some details on his property. Would you be interested in this property? And I can go, hey, it's in a location that I like. It's a size that I like, whatever. Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing the financials on it. And he goes, so the broker goes, hey, this is our opinion of the value. Oh, by the way, we may have a couple of guys that would be interested in. And so they that's part of their pitch to the, because brokers get paid when transactions happen. That's all. They're just trying to make transactions. They don't necessarily care what the price is as long as both parties agree and the transaction actually happens. So all that to say that if a deal hasn't been listed and put out into the blasted onto the interwebs and all the websites that push, the Craigslist and the LoopNets and all, which is like Zillow for commercial properties. If that hasn't happened, then by definition, there's a very small audience of people even know that deal exists. So, the smaller the level of competition, the better. So off market means that basically a broker has contacted, several, we'll call it 3 to 5 outfits that could potentially take the deal or buy the deal. They'll push that out to their small little list of appropriate investors or ones that they that have indicated they are interested in this type of property in this location or whatever. And so that gives you the ability to either be the only one looking at it or potentially or just one of a few looking at it versus the entire internet, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This is one of those things that, and we've talked about this before.
Sure.
I think probably more than once. It's a good thing to bring up because I'm always thinking my training being what it is, like what is our audience? What is our message here, right? And our audience of new investors is going to be like, well, that sounds a lot like Inside. like you get the good deals because like the people. And it's like, yeah kind of, but it's not like you were handed a Rolodex of of connections.
No, that's something you build that network. You build that out, buying and selling properties, and building a reputation for yourself. Sure, that's where the experience comes in,
right? And they have to obviously the broker it's not just a matter of like knowing it, like you exist, and they have them having your phone number. They want to be like willing to email you and stuff. Like I don't know how many phone numbers I have in my phone of people that I'll never call. I just haven't got around to deleting them. So it's more than that, right? It is about them. Sure. Yeah. You being someone who would be a viable.
Yeah. And cultivating that relationship over, my broker relationships, the ones that bring me deals. I've literally been talking to them for years of, hey, here's a property. Okay. Not interested in that one. Here's a property. Okay. Yeah. We'll make an offer on that one, and so on. And like, it's kind of like, they just keep whittling you down as a buyer, what you're looking for. And then, so the more information you give them on yourself, and the more you kind of follow through with what you normally do. They just say, hey, there are times, and it's happened that just somebody goes, this is a Matthias property right here, gives me a call, says, here's the stuff. I say, perfect, send it over, and then boom, I'm like, hey, I'll get you an offer, as soon as we can, kind of thing. So I mean, that's the goal, kind of in our perfect deal scenario. That's how it would go. Is they go, hey, I just talked to this owner today. Hadn't talked to him in a while, but apparently he's looking to selling, and he's more motivated than we thought. And here you go. And so I'm like, perfect. Don't list it. Let me get an offer in. We'll see if we can get this thing, because save you a lot of the work of doing all this pretty graphics and paying for pushing it out to all these websites and sending it to 18 million people. Let's just get this thing done here. I'll give the seller what he wants, and he'll give me what I want. So.
Right. I mean, of course, they're bringing a buyer to buy it for a price that is approximate to what the value is, what the seller is trying to get. So it's like just putting people together. It did make me wonder. This is not part of the perfect deal, but what happens when a broker says, "Oh yeah, I know, I've got a short list of people that'll definitely be interested in this property," and then like all of them just pass. At which point they're like, "Oh, I guess we're gonna list it now." I don't even what's the next move there.
Well, that would be a bad scenario, because I mean you overplayed your hand essentially. But yeah, at that point, I mean who knows what they tell sellers at that point? Like, oh, we had a bunch of people, we can't get them the right paper. Maybe they exist, maybe they don't. I don't know. We'll see. I suppose I'm sure they just make up stories and try to make them feel good and talk them into whatever the next, okay, let's list it for this and start taking pictures or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, sure, on that note of passing, and you saying, oh, they send you stuff, you say yes, no, most of the time, honestly, no, and here's why. And they start, figuring out essentially the algorithm for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I guess, at some point, it does seem that if you keep saying no, they might stop reaching out, even though they know you're a viable option. But I wanted to segue to the next point here, the next thing we want to talk about, because of the reasons why you might pass. How often is it this next thing that we want to talk about, which is who we're hoping is selling? And so talk a little bit about who we're hoping is selling, and then I had a couple follow-ups about that, the dynamic of that.
Yeah, one of our favorite, we'll call it a demographic to buy from, is a generational owner, somebody who's owned the property for years, typically an older person who's this has been, a part of their nest egg, a part of their retirement plan, either operating it for cash flow, this X property that we're talking about, this perfect deal, operating it for cash flow, or selling it and then using that cash as kind of their cash for the rest of their lives, or to, put that into an annuity, whatever it might be, kind of their retirement plan. This property is involved in their retirement plan. But that usually means with the generational owner, the kind of the older, they tend to do things themselves. They're not efficient. They tend to hire friends more than professionals in terms of like property managers. They're down as they get into the waning years. They are willing to put up with less and less headache. So one, they're going to be relatively motivated to sell the property, just because if you can present a smooth transaction to them, typically they're going to be all about that, because you're solving a headache for them. At this point, they know they need some of this money, right, as part of their retirement plan, but they don't want the headache that comes with running the property. That's why they're deciding to sell. They've operated it for years. It's done what they wanted it to do, and now they're just ready to kind of ride off into the sunset and stop having to deal with, we got to put the roof on building 2 or whatever. So that particular demographic they tend to lend to having a value add play because they have inefficient operations. They don't hire the most professional people often. And a lot of times they've owned the property long enough that they kind of let it go a little bit.
There's going to be deferred maintenance.
Not necessarily, I mean, I don't want to call it deferred maintenance, but they get used to seeing it. So it's like, hey, we haven't painted it in 10 years. But it's such a slow, gradual decline that it looks, if I walk in and look at it, it's like, oh man, that thing needs a paint job. But to him, it's like, hey man, this is the way it's looked for the past 4 years, or generally speaking, that kind of stuff. So they tend to, things can get overgrown. They don't do the major deferred maintenance. This is a good way. Doesn't mean the property's in bad shape. It just means it might not look as fresh and sharp as it could. with
Mhm.
relatively little heavy lifting, and that's part of what we like about it is that they're behind in raising rents, so the rents are going to be lower. They're inefficient, so their expenses may be higher, or their processes are just slower. It takes longer to turn units, these kind of things. So their economic occupancy is lower. All these different things. So that's what we look for when it's one of the easiest ways to identify value add possibilities, I guess, is if it's a kind of an older owner that's owned it for a while.
Yeah, and they'll have a lot of times it seems like there's a lot of long-term renters there because it's not like Matthias is saying. He didn't want to cast aspersions on the generational owner that they're like just not fixing things. And when I said deferred maintenance, because it's a little bit different than that, and I get that. But they're gonna have long-term owners because they're good owners and they know the people. But at the same time, you can attract new people because you're gonna raise the level of operation, of response time, of
The value proposition from the landlord side is going to go up significantly by putting professional manager, freshening the property, all the things that we like to do, paint, curb appeal, trimming back the hedges, etc.
So, well, my question previously, and I want to just talk about this briefly and then move a couple of things I had, was when you get these paperwork, how many times have you been like, oh, this is a pretty solid, like, there's a lot here that I could dig into. I actually kind of like this in a lot of ways. And then you find out it's like not the type of seller that you're looking for. And then you pass on that. Or is it just typically there's not the opportunity to do the maximum value add if it's not a generational owner? So they kind of go hand in hand.
One's more an indicator of the other. It's not necessarily, there's plenty of young owners that do the exact same thing that generational owners do.
Well, so either way, though, it would have to be it would have to be like a just a person owning it or a family owning it. We're not buying from us.
Correct. Yeah. That's a good point. It's typically somebody this is a side thing. A lawyer or a doctor. I've looked at a lot of properties owned by lawyers or doctors who they need real estate. They need some tax write-offs. They're high income, high net worth potentially, but they don't have the time to dedicate to properly running. If they're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. So they own the real estate on the side, but it's not an optimized investment vehicle because they do it themselves and they don't have the time because they're whatever their primary profession is.
So I mean, I guess you probably don't necessarily remember, but I mean, is it a thing pretty common that you're like, oh, there's a lot good here, but this is not the type of person I want to buy from? Or that's a weird way of saying it. Like, it sounds like you're discriminating. You know what I mean?
I'll go by the property and whatever's available. I typically don't evaluate the owner that much. Part of what the generation, they're more motivated typically. The older they are, the more motivated they are to sell. So you can, they'll accept a lower price or a longer, whatever terms. We generally have a little bit more leeway on terms when we're buying from them because they're a little bit more motivated to sell. If they're younger, if they're a family, they may or may not be motivated. So that's just something you have to check into. So that's why I put the perfect deal would come from a generation owner because I, generally speaking, they tend to be more motivated than a 50-year-old doctor who's all else being equal, he may or may not be as motivated to sell because he doesn't need to. This year, it's not any different headache than it will be the next. He's not retiring at 50. You know what I mean? The 78-year-old, he's tired of messing with it, and he knows that he can't do it forever. And next year, he might be his last year of being mobile and traveling or whatever. So he's that kind of thing. So he's going to be more motivated, generally speaking, than a younger family or doctor or whatever.
Right. So in those instances, you're talking about going by the property, and it seems like it'd be, I guess, I mean, you're getting a lot of paperwork, so you can dive in, right? But just going by the property, it would be interesting to know how exactly you decide, oh, this is just, inefficient operation and not something else, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like you can kind of gauge that this is, sure, you can gauge the buildings, but I don't know. I guess just going through the property wouldn't tell you everything. Of course, you've got rent rolls and all that stuff, but how do you, what's your kind of process there?
Yeah. So one of the things I've talked about multiple times is, can I find this property online?
Mm,
Is it listed anywhere? Is it on
mm.
Zillow? Is it on rent.com, apartments.com?
Sure.
All those things. So if it's not, I know that the rents are low
Mm,
without looking at anything else. One of the caveats, I mean, not caveats, but when I'm buying, we'll talk a little bit about market in a second. But basically, if the perfect deal is going to be in a market that I know and I know well. So I know what rent should be for X type of units in a
mm,
property or in a little market or an area, even of a smaller sub area of a market. So if I find a property in there with a generational owner that I can't find online, we're already cooking with fire. Like I know, hey, there's a good chance the rents are low. I can't find it, so that's another indicator the rents are low from what they could or should be attaining.
mm,
And then just a lot of times the actual paperwork itself that you get from
mm.
that type of owner, like we're talking, I've gotten notebook paper before. I've gotten scribbled pen on scanned in.
Yeah.
Like oh man, some of the stuff which is a kind of a deterrent to lenders and big players because it's you got to do some forensic math to try to figure out what their actual expenses are, things like that. But again, that comes hand in hand with knowing the market because I know what it costs to run XYZ type of unit in my select, the markets that I know really well. I know what the expenses should be. So I'm confident
Yeah.
buying, even if it's cloudy, it's a bit gray what the actual history of the property is. I got to do my best to convince a lender of what's going on. But the reality is I know it's like. It's almost like, yeah, this is what was happening in the past. But with a good inspection, that makes me confident that the structure is sound or whatever. I know what I can operate this for.
Right.
Given
'Cause
I put it to my standard baseline for operating going forward, I know what the expenses are going to be.
yeah, because it seems like as long as you can determine what the rent is now and what the rent could be,
Mm-hmm.
the rest is almost like a fixed, it's almost like a coefficient that doesn't really have any relationship to what they're doing because
True.
it's not like you have to continue with their process or who
Yeah,
they're
because they have
who they're
some guy in a
using.
raggedy T-shirt that's his handyman or whatever that he knows
Yeah.
and he's known for 30 years. Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of what all of these play together and indicate that there is value to be added. There's stuff, and it's relatively simple versus huge renovations, foundation issue rebuilding or whatever. Because that's a clear value add is when, hey, one of the buildings burned down, we got to build it back. That's the value we'll add to this property. That's a heavy lift. That's a lot of money. What I can do very easily is install professional management and hands-on ownership, and I can eliminate those, and market the appropriate rents and market appropriately. All this goes with professional management. I can fix those problems for effectively free. That's part of what makes it such a perfect deal, because I don't have to put a whole bunch of money outlays in order to achieve these rents. I know they're low from what they could be getting just because they're not marketed properly, et cetera. If that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to ask about the kind of seller thing, and then we can move on to the well, you kind of already brought it up, which is the market. But it seems like it's possible, and maybe you've seen this, where all indications are this is a poorly run property or inefficiently. I don't want to say poorly, inefficiently. Yeah. And there's definitely promise there, and you're pretty sure that you can determine that there's a lot of good there that you can work on, but it's being sold by a company. Is that like a red flag for you? I was just thinking about that. Like, it seems possible that a company could just be, the people who run that small company could just be bad at their job.
Entirely possible. It is kind of, because I wonder, did they run out of money? Are they an investor group like us, or they have investor funds that they're trying to recoup? Did they pay have they, refinanced and pulled all their cash, and now it's a husk and they've got all their money out of it, so they don't care? I mean, I ask why every time I talk to a broker about a property. I go, why are they selling? What's the motivation here? What are we talking? And that's generally where I find out about, hey, man, he's retired. He's tired of owning properties, or what have you. Or this group they're in trouble on a different property and they need cash to help that one out. Who knows, whatever it might be. But yeah, I do. I mean, I want to know what is the motivation here, and why. If it's obviously it's not operating properly, or you would never sell it, right? Like, everything's not hunky dory perfect, because you would just keep refinancing and go on forever. there's always something on, hey, the investors want their money out of it. I want to move on from this area. Who knows? I've heard and seen it all.
Mm-hmm.
But that goes into I wouldn't say red flag, but I need to understand, because if it's like, hey, if they're offering it for super low price, they're super motivated, or they're marketing it super aggressively, trying to get a lower price than I would have assumed. I'm gonna go, all right, did you guys just find a sinkhole under one of the buildings, or like what's
right.
you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, my eyebrows go up when I see a deal that's too good to be true. I go, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was thinking too good to be true, just all the things line up, but it's being sold by someone where it seems like that wouldn't have happened otherwise. That shouldn't have happened.
Should know better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, again, I wouldn't turn it away just because it isn't a generational owner. I'd have to dig deeper and make sure that there wasn't something I wasn't aware of causing all the problems.
Okay. You want to talk about market next. I was looking at the next two that probably can kind of be combined a little bit.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. They kind of go hand in hand too.
Yeah. So let's jump to, this is something we've definitely talked about a number of times.
Yeah. So basically the kind of the next tenet of a perfect deal would be location. So I want it to be in continuing our theme of being kind of an under the radar property. It's not being marketed. It's off market, generational owner, not many people chasing it down. The location is we're not going to find this property in downtown Manhattan. You know what I mean? This is not a Dallas property. This is a outskirts of a tertiary, secondary market property that we're in the path of progress that we're going to find for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, institutional players drive up price. If you have an institutional buyer like a bank or a hedge fund or somebody that would buy this property, or a family office or something, they're going to have a lot of buying power that would beat out the likes of us, the relatively small investors. So they stay away from secondary, tertiary markets, generally speaking. So that helps us stay below the radar when we look at these markets. But we can have the same, and I've said this over and over, but we can have the same growth percentages on a smaller scale as a Charlotte or a Houston or whatever market in our small submarkets, and we can achieve the same rent growth, the same everything, just at a smaller scale. So which ties in hand with the next 10, which we talked about the size of the property. The perfect size of this dream deal is kind of a 40 units to 100 units for the same reason. If it's 250 units, it's on somebody's radar. There's a much smaller pool of people who can take down. I mean, we're talking, $15 to $20 million deal. That's not a huge pool of buyers. The people who could take down a $2 million deal, that's a much bigger pool of buyers. So however, it's very localized. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's more buyers, but they're not going to know about it for all these other reasons we've talked about. I want to fight like one or two other people who know the value that we're looking at here, and I want to beat them out versus an institutional guy who's looking at the 250 unit, because there's only so many of those. But there's tons of these 40 to 100, and they're in these small tertiary markets, and they're kind of completely none of the big players know anything about them. Only the real local players do, and I want to be that local player that knows the value of these properties and is the first guy. So that's why the perfect deal is it's something that I can handle very quickly, and I can underwrite the value very quickly, make an offer, a competitive offer, because I know it's right in my wheelhouse. And that size prohibits anybody else from kind of top roping me and outbidding me, because they have so many more resources and they can buy cash really quickly or something like that. Staying in the tertiary markets and staying in this size is what keeps those guys from jumping into the ring.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, it's a specialty assessment, essentially, right? That the bigger people they're not developing those skills because they have other focuses.
And it's not necessarily worth their time. They need to deploy $50 million. They're going to do it in 2 properties or 1 property versus 25 smaller properties. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that kind of manpower and time, and it's not worth their time to jump down to smaller properties.
And as we discussed before, I mean, it's also a perfect deal because it's in the wheelhouse of us, and it's in the wheelhouse of the type of investor we're trying to recruit, who's going to have a certain amount of capital, but probably not the amount that would enable us to raise, I don't know, 10 million to take down a 200 unit.
Sure. Exactly. It allows me to keep the investment minimums low. If 40 to 100 units, I could see that being anywhere from like 50,000 to 20,000 is being our minimum, depending on the quality and size of the unit, so on and so forth. But the beautiful part of having this size and that type of, it's a growth market, but it's off of everybody's radar. And something else I'll add in here is preferably near one of our other properties, right? That gives us huge economies of scale. We can use the same manager to 2 properties and kind of, same handyman, same like really greatly reduces our per unit cost for maintenance, especially, and then for management purposes and in marketing as well, because it's you basically just do the same. I mean, I have one of our properties in Hattiesburg. We have 3 different properties right next to each other that all use the same manager, same marketing, and it makes it a whole lot simpler than if I had to, if they were scattered all over the, at different towns or whatever, then it's not nearly as efficient as since they're all right there.
Right. Being able to build out that network, and then of course balance that hopefully with moving into new places, new markets, and then building that one out too.
Sure.
But yeah, so 40 to 100. I mean, that's what we've talked about, that kind of mid-sized specialty that, this isn't somebody who's just getting started, who just is trying to do this on their own, is not going to be able to hit that. And it's going to be a little small for the kind of big time players. And anybody who's working their way up, we're going to have more experience. So it's kind of perfect for that. Now I was going to ask, moving on to the next point you have here about the age of the property, the vintage, as it were. Is it more likely that the size that we're looking for will have been built in like the 80s? Because essentially we look for 80s and newer, but we're probably going to end up, the target in a lot of ways is going to end up being 80s and 90s, it seems. But if people are developing something, in the last 20 years, they're probably going to be bigger.
Well, not necessarily, but in the markets that we look for, I think so. Because I think the markets, the smaller markets, by definition, you wouldn't go build, for instance, we bought a 40 unit in Gulfport. I don't know that when those were built in the 80s, you would have built a 250 unit.
Yeah.
Definitely not in that location, because it was probably on the outskirts and there was just a few neighborhoods around. You know what I mean? So I think like one of them kind of leads to the other. I think because we're looking at these secondary, tertiary markets that, in the path of progress, it would have been, when they were built, it would have been much less definitely much less densely populated than it is now. So I don't think you would have built the same size. And nowadays, it does seem like, you're going to build 180 to 300 units whenever you're building these giant complexes. But I mean, that's not to say there aren't 300 unit properties built in the 90s, but I think in our markets, because they're smaller markets, I think it makes sense that they're the smaller size built back then.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that they're definitely like 80 unit neighborhoods, whatever you want to call them, complexes or whatever, built in the 2000s, but
sure.
But it just seems that there's going to be an alignment there, especially if we're talking about tertiary markets that are smaller and growing, but we're not going to attract that level of development.
Right. Not back then at the time. Exactly. But I did want to touch on a point. So the reason we pick 80s and newer, meaning 80s, 90s and on, is in the 60s and 70s, they had some wild building practices. You've got your aluminum wiring, you've got your asbestos in the walls and in the ceilings, and your lead paints and all sorts of crazy stuff that they were doing. There's some like Chinese like drywall replacement stuff that was really hot for a second in the 70s. That's like highly toxic now and like a real hazard situation if you find it now. So 80s and newer we had figured it out. You're not going to have cast iron pipes. You're going to have PVC almost always. You're going to have copper wiring. You're not going to have, and your exteriors are going to be, your brick or your stucco, and it's going to be a lot easier to handle than some of the stuff they were doing back in the day. So that's generally why we make that cutoff. It's a lot easier, and
renovation's got to be easier
because of that. Renovations are easier, and insurance is a lot more affordable for those two because of there's not the liability doesn't have to worry about asbestos, in a fire or whatever. So those are the reasons we picked that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. If you had brought a property that's older than that, you're like, no thanks. But I would think that the market and the size probably dictate that they fall within kind of what that timeline anyways, for the most part, right? I mean,
there's always going to be older ones. We've bought 60s. We still own a 60s property today. It's harder. There's things associated with it that are tougher to deal with. So I wouldn't call it. It's definitely doable. I wouldn't be my perfect deal to find. It would be it would be 80s or newer.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be older than us. Essentially, is what we're saying.
That's a good point. Yeah, fair.
Now, this last, I think, is the last one here, is an interesting one. I think it's going to make a lot of sense and intuitively, but it's just an interesting one to think about as far as goals and knowing what you can do with it. But, let's go ahead and talk about what you're hoping the units to be like.
Yeah, so we would want kind of an open concept. So we don't want to have a weird layout because sometimes it's just hard to deal with that. And then the ideal unit in the markets that we play in is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. There's a lot of 2-1s, but 2-2s are at a premium because you have options with it, and it's kind of it's all going to play together. You have more options in a 2-2. You can market to students per se, so one person in one room has their own bathroom.
Don't have to share a
one
bathroom.
person in the other room. Yeah, so you could have roommate situation, which is been happening for eons.
Oh yeah.
And then you could have a young family there, so the kids bedroom and a parent's bedroom, an office, whatever, or a guest room for a couple or a single person who just wants some more space. So 2-2s are like the premier unit size and amount of bathrooms. Not to say you can't do extremely well with a 2-1 or 3-2 or whatever. It's just if I got to pick, there would be 1,000 square feet open concept with 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. Because I can upgrade those to a top tier and go after young professionals and do the roommate thing, or I can market them to families and do like a mid-range affordable. I have a lot of options of what I can do and what my target audience is going to be if I have those. Those are kind of the ideal, because 1,000 square feet in a 2-bedroom is probably 150 square feet bigger than the average. So you're going to have bigger, more space units, but you're really not going to, and you might be able to get a little bit of a rent premium on that. But when you're buying, you're not necessarily buying that big of, you're not getting a big price bump in the cost of the units per se, in terms of what you're buying them for. Like, you're not going to pay necessarily you might, depending on the condition of the units, but it's more depending on the condition of the units than it is the size of the units. So if I can, everything else being equal, I'll take the 1,000 over the 850 square feet. Obviously, I can make either of them work, but if I had my druthers, I'd go with the 1,000.
Well, it just seems like anybody walking in who's got, if it's a couple and they've got a kid, or if it's 2 people who want to be roommates or students, that 150 square feet is going to make a difference. For sure. Like, they're going to notice that. Like, the living room is going to be a little bit roomier, or their bedroom is going to be a little bit further away from the other bedroom, or
and there's space for closets. Typically your closets are going to be bigger than that. A lot of that goes to closets, and a lot of it is,
and the kitchen's not going to be a galley kitchen.
I don't want to say storage, because it's not like it's a closet storage, but it's like you have more room for stuff. You could put a bigger sectional in. You can have more things in there than a small 650, 700 square foot.
Yeah, I was just thinking about places that I lived, and I don't know. Again, I've said this a lot. I don't know about our typical listener, but as someone who went to school forever to get a PhD, I was living in all kinds of places. But I was just thinking that in undergrad I lived in 2-1, and put up with that. Well, then I lived in a big house, but essentially it was a 2-1 upstairs. But grad school, it was, I think at that point, you're like, no, we're not sharing a bathroom.
Yeah, for sure.
But that it does make a difference. That 1,000 versus 850, I can definitely see that for sure. Now, I guess having druthers, as you said, if I had my druthers, like, would you choose? Say you have a 60 unit that has like 42 twos and like 20 or whatever. and then you can buy another 60 unit that has all 2.2s. And I mean, it's basically the same price. I guess you would have to be it's the same price per, square foot.
Yeah.
Right. Holding things equal is the same price. Which do you choose? I mean, I guess, because I know we have properties where there's a more bigger range than that.
Yeah.
But
it depends, because it depends on location wise. Hey, is it next to a great school? Because obviously 3.2s that's almost exclusively families at that point. Families or established people, and chances of having young kids is high in a 3.2 scenario. So I would say, hey, where are we at in the neighborhood? Is there like a park or a school down the street? If so, then I'm definitely going to try to get the bigger units, because especially if it's not all the same. If half of it's 2.2, half of it's 3.2, cool, that's great. But not knowing that in our particular dream scenario, I would go, the perfect unit is a 2.2 with 1,000 square feet. But there's plenty of reasons why you would want a 3.2 or a 2.1 or a 1.1. If it's right across the street from a Hyundai plant or something, whatever it might be. There's reasons to want the other unit sizes and amount of bedrooms and bathrooms. But no, I mean, there's unlimited number of scenarios, but typically it's geared, like, how is the neighborhood geared towards children? If I'm looking at a 3.2, because that brings in young families into play.
But I mean, what you are saying basically is that you cannot get the amount of more rent you can get for the bigger unit isn't necessarily increasing the margin.
Right. It depends. If I'm near, I might be able to. People want to live near that playground, near that school, near that park. Maybe I can get the premium that I would like to get out of a 3.2 versus a 2.2, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
I will need to know other factors.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I think that we can wrap it up with this too. Is like, the key is you want to have the biggest pool of potential renters for your units, right? The more competition of potential renters coming in, the higher price you can demand.
Well, that's why I think 3.2s would be good to have in the mix, because it does diversify what you can offer it to.
True. But again, I may not be able to get, like, let's say I'm just making numbers up here, but let's say I'm renting my 2.2s for $1,200. I may not be able to get $1,400 for the 3.2s if there's not enough in that neighborhood that pulls, because it's a slightly different pool of potential renters. So I'd love to attract all those different renters, but if the people who are attracted to the 3.2s, I may be able to get maybe $1,300 a month for those if there aren't enough amenities in the neighborhood geared towards the family dynamic, if that makes sense. So it'll depend.
Yeah, but I mean, and then on the flip side, though, I mean, even if you can't get, obviously you might have paid more for it, but it doesn't necessarily cost you more to maintain it.
Yeah, I mean, not significantly. Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not like we break down, for instance, insurance by door, but you're not paying by door, and it's like, oh, this door is more.
Yeah,
because it's bigger. It's the whole thing. So it's the whole property. Anyways, okay. So, well, just we're looking for off market. Hopefully, looking for a generational seller or someone who's motivated to sell, and it's probably because they've been trying to do it on their own, not operating as efficiently as possible, and may have not kept up both with market rents and market offerings as far as what the interior looks like. I don't know if we hit on that one, but that's the other part of that. Sure. And then, a market that's tertiary, which means smaller but growing markets. We're not talking about in the country, guys. We're talking about cities you've heard of. Essentially, like if you've heard of this city and it's a city people go to, probably not talking about there.
Nah, not that bad.
It's not that bad. I'm kidding. No, but it's kind of hard to actually describe that, because I feel like size doesn't really go into tertiary, right? Like, as much as it can fluctuate in size.
Yeah, there's a big range of what counts as a tertiary. I mean, secondary would be your
just
Indianapolis, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Not your major metros.
But
not your top 10.
But like major metros themselves. Yeah, exactly. So now you're talking about just 40 to 100 units. We've talked about why that is. I mean, it's something we can take down. It's a niche. It's something that the bigger one will overlook and smaller can't get to. It's our specialty. It helps with the investor minimums. And then no buildings older than us. And finally, the sweet spot, the Goldilocks, if you will, of type of unit is the 2-2. Not too big, not too small. I assume that the porch is just right. All right. Well, we appreciate you hanging out with us and listening. I hope that lets you in on a little bit more about the process of why we go after the types we do. And of course, if you have any more questions about that, if you want any more info, or, if you want to actually talk specifics about the types of places that we have, there's a way you can do that. It's not here. But you can reach out to us, have a conversation with Matthias. We can get you in that process of getting into the fold, and we'll be more than happy at that point to share many more details. But until then, until we hear from you, we'll be saying goodbye and thanks for hanging out with us. And we hope you'll come back next week for another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See ya.